All right. Hello and welcome everyone to Pragmatic Live, Pragmatic Institute's webinar and podcast series where we tackle the biggest challenges facing today's product teams. My name is Rebecca Kalogeris. I am the Vice President of Marketing at Pragmatic Institute, and more importantly to you, today, the host for today's event. Now, many of you are already familiar with Pragmatic Institute, but those of you not aware of us until today, welcome to the family. Pragmatic Institute specializes in training companies on how to be truly market and data driven. We provide techniques for listening to the market and gathering market facts and key data, and then using that information to shape strategies and drive execution. But enough about us. Before we get started, let's go through, though, a couple of housekeeping items. First, a recording of this webinar and a copy of the slides will be available after today's event. You'll be able to access them at pragmaticinstitute.com/live later this week, and we'll also send out an email with a link to the recording as well. Second, questions. We love questions. We encourage you to enter any and all questions in the Q&A section throughout the presentation, and we will try to get through as many as possible at the end of today's event. One thing that is certain in today's business world is change, right? The prognosis, the environment, the priorities are shifting weekly, if not faster. So how do we as product managers and marketers communicate effectively during these times? How do we make sure we're heard? Here to help us tackle this is Ellie Mirman, CMO of Crayon, a market and competitive intelligence platform that helps businesses track, analyze, and act on everything happening outside of their four walls. Welcome, Ellie, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. So glad to be here and talking with everyone about something that is definitely high on my mind and a lot of the product marketers and managers and just all sorts of different professionals, certainly on all of our minds these days. And that's how to keep tabs on all of the crazy market shifts happening around us, and how do we enable our internal teams in order to make sure that they're adjusting as they need. So here's what we're going to be talking about today. First, let's talk about high velocity markets and how we keep pace with all of the different shifts happening around us. And then we're going to dive into 4 key areas of the business and how we enable all sorts of different folks in these crazy times. First, talking about maintaining differentiated messaging, really working closely with our marketing friends and colleagues. Then we're going to talk about enabling sales so that they're able to win as many deals as possible, especially when there are fewer deals to go around these days. And then we're going to talk about product pivots and how we may need to make some shifts in the offerings that we put out to the market, or even the packaging of those offerings. And then finally, we're going to talk about executive leadership and how we're able to guide all of the leaders across our organization and keep them informed of what's happening and how to adjust. So let's first set the context around market velocity and all the things around us that seem to be moving and changing that much faster than usual. So the reality is that our market environment is tougher than ever before. Certainly tougher to win deals. Budgets are tighter across the board. Operations are leaner as a result. And it's never been more important to keep a competitive edge and stay on top of what's happening around us. So here's just a bit of a snapshot, an example of a particular industry that we're all very familiar with these days, which is conferencing technology. So this is data that we are gathering in our platform, just the number of overall activities from competitors in the conference technology space. So you have Zoom, GoToMeetings, WebEx, Adobe Connect. And you can see there's definitely been an uptick in recent months as a lot of folks have been shifting online. And while we don't have the data from the previous year, this is even up from the previous year. So a lot of activity happening across the board. So it's never, so market agility is that much more important. It needs to be at this all-time high in all of our organizations. So the question is, how can we keep a tight pulse on everything that's happening? Especially when there's just so much to keep tabs on. You think about even just one company and their activities, just across the board, across the web, there are just so many different places where they could be shifting their strategies and their tactics, and there's just so much to keep tabs on, for everything from regulations to marketing campaigns to new pricing that they're putting out to market. Just so much to keep tabs on. So when we're talking about how do we best arm our teams to take advantage of an understanding what's happening in our markets, we really need to focus that. So these are the four key focus areas for our presentation and for our organizations. So first, of course, is sales, and making sure that sales is able to stay on top of what's happening in the market, and avoid losing any of those competitive deals. There may be fewer deals to go around, but we can still enable our team to make sure that they're not losing what's coming across their plates. In marketing, we want to make sure that our messaging is current, can't just be business as usual. And then we want to maintain a pulse on competitor campaigns and press and all of their activities out in communicating with prospects. On the product side, we want to evaluate whether or not we need to make some sort of pivots in our product offerings, in our roadmap. We'll dive more into that, but really understanding how customer needs and challenges have shifted in the current market environment is really key to where we're going to invest product-wise. And similarly, pricing and packaging, especially to support maybe some customers who have been hit hardest in today's market environment. And then finally, with our executive audience, making sure that we're able to respond to these major market and competitive shifts and adjust our strategies, whether they be short-term tactical strategies or the long-term direction of the company. And then within these four areas, we want to focus in on market intelligence as well as competitive intelligence. And so what I mean by that is on the market intelligence side, these are the macroeconomic developments, the overall economic growth, retraction in any market that we might operate in, any shifts in buyer preferences, so any habits among our customers, how that might have changed some of their budgets and so on, what they're buying today versus yesterday. And then any regulatory, policies, legislation, things that might affect our business at that level, as both in terms of our own business and, of course, our buyers. And then on the competitive intelligence side, it's things like pricing and packaging changes. What are competitors putting out in the market? Have they shifted their pricing and packaging? Have they shifted their messaging and positioning? How they're talking about their product? We, of course, want to stay differentiated in that situation. PR statements, press releases, social media, really all of that public communications happening. Maybe some major headcount adjustments if we see certain competitors are having layoffs, or maybe they're investing in one area versus another, like product versus sales. And then any M&A activity, funding announcements, and really any financial moves that would dramatically impact the way that we can be competitive amongst these sets of companies. So let's dig into that first audience, the marketing audience, and specifically around differentiated messaging and positioning, and how we can make sure that we're maintaining our differentiation. So a little bit more data here. So what we have here is data from the email marketing space. So I wanted to show a different industry from web conferencing because really the market shift that we are living through right now is impacting all of us. And you can see that pretty clearly here. We have just messaging and positioning changes for a set of 4 competitors in the email marketing space. And you can see they are making a lot of changes. So back in March, 3 out of the 4 companies here really started to make quite a few changes to their messaging and positioning. Of course, we've got, I think that's Yesware, a little bit behind back in March, but has really picked up steam in April, playing a little bit of catch up. But a lot of activity. Think about Yesware making 15 messaging or positioning changes, all in the span of 1 month. That's pretty huge. Clearly, there's a lot of activity happening here. So what do I do with this, right? How do I adjust my messaging when all of my competitors around me are also adjusting their messaging? What are the tactics that we can take? So what this comes down to is a balance between 2 forces here. We've got, making sure that we're being conscious of what our competitors are doing, being aware of what messaging they're putting out in front of our customers and our prospects, and we want to make sure that our value prop is differentiated compared to the messages that they're putting out there. But then, of course, we also want to be customer centric. We want to really focus in on the customers that we're trying to serve, their goals, their challenges. We want to learn directly from them. What are their needs, and making sure that we're addressing those in our messaging. And these might be a little bit competing at times, but we really need to incorporate both of them into effective messaging. So first, let's talk a little bit about that customer centricity. We, of course, want to know about our customers' goals, their pains, and the needs that they have, and how those might be changing over time as the market is shifting. So a couple of strategies here that you could be employing right now, especially surveys. So you might already be doing some sort of regular Net Promoter Score, NPS survey. You could potentially add a question there to learn more about how their needs are changing. You could, of course, sit in on sales calls or even calls with customers, arranging your own interviews as needed, just to talk with them and learn more about what their needs are and how that might be evolving. And then even monitoring customer conversations on the public web, looking at reviews, looking at what people are saying in social media. There's just such a great scale to that, to be able to go beyond who you're able to talk to one-on-one. And you can incorporate a lot of those learnings into kind of this analysis. Now, if we look at the flip side of that, the competitor consciousness, what you want to do here is monitor what your competitors are saying, specifically monitoring their messaging shifts, and taking a particular look at how they're trying to differentiate right now, right? A lot of companies are changing their messaging. A lot of companies are trying to adjust their messaging based on the market environment or what they're hearing from customers. So if you've done this type of analysis before, it's time to do kind of a fresh take on it to see how things may have changed. So you can look at their websites for some of the higher level messaging shifts. You can also look at emails that they're sending out, ads, social media, really looking at some of the tactical changes, but even a couple of words can be pretty meaningful when we're talking about messaging. And what we want to end up with is our own messaging and our own value proposition remaining differentiated in light of the changes that our competitors are making. So want to make this a little bit more tangible, and so we have a few examples. So first, of course, web conferencing, very close to all of us these days. We have here an example of Microsoft Teams, who of course is a competitor to Zoom and WebEx, and companies that are getting a lot more activity potentially than themselves. So very competitive market. Of course, Zoom has got shot into the kind of the front runner position there quite recently. And while it's become very popular, there have been flaws. And one of the flaws that has come out is around their security and their privacy. So you can see here Microsoft Teams has taken a direct stab at that. They're not naming Zoom, but their new messaging, of course, is talking about the current environment. You even see part of their kind of web conferencing meeting there. Someone's wearing a mask. But what you have here is Microsoft addressing one of their competitors' weaknesses, especially that has come out recently. So great example of making sure that you're differentiated and even kind of poking a needle a little bit at a competitor's weakness. Another example here, it's from Realtor.com. Of course, the housing market right now is in a bit of a strange place. Open houses being closed and things like that. But what we have here is Realtor.com has adjusted their messaging. They even reference hashtag stay home. And they're trying to reference some of that empathy for their customers and what their customers are going through right now. But what's interesting here is they haven't let go of some of their core differentiation, which is their tagline here: the most complete source of homes for sale and real estate near you. And what's interesting within the housing site industry right now, you look at folks like Zillow and Trulia, they have definitely hit on the empathy side of the messaging. A lot of them talking about staying home and staying healthy. but they're not referencing their differentiation in a lot of their messaging. So really important to keep in mind, what is our, key message that we want to get across? How do we connect with our customers, but how do we also sound different from what our competitors are saying? All right, so if you see some sort of changes, how do we actually get this out to the team? How do we communicate those changes to the rest of marketing as well as others in the organization? Slack can be a great way, or any sort of internal chat for any small tactical changes to get communicated. So you think about any sort of like very easy to understand standalone updates that can go out through some sort of chat. Newsletters can be great for some regular market updates. Think about also the frequency that might make sense for your team. So if you may have been doing quarterly or monthly before, you might want to ramp up that frequency because things are changing so quickly. And then, of course, any sort of virtual meetings, great ways to educate the team on larger shifts and how to process it, how to understand what's going on, and start to get those juices flowing in terms of how we want to shift our own messaging based on what we're seeing in the market. All right, so let's talk about our friends over in sales, an audience that we very frequently work with, regardless of if you're in product marketing or product management or really other parts of marketing and so on. So some interesting data from HubSpot here, just to kind of set the context for what sales is going through. Within this, COVID pandemic, we're definitely seeing a lot of shifts in the business world and buying behaviors. And so what you see here is that the number of deals that are both being created and closed has decreased quite significantly. No surprise, just kind of anecdotally, us feeling it in the market. There's definitely a lot less activity. A lot of budgets have been frozen, just a lot fewer sales to go around. The reality is that we can't do anything about our prospects' budget problems, layoffs, or spending freezes. We don't have control over those things. But what we can do is instill buyer confidence in our solution, in our company, and ensure sales doesn't lose competitive deals. So what are some of the things that tactically we can do here? Well, first off, lend expertise. The folks that we have on this webinar, you are experts in your product, your market, your customers. That is really valuable for our sales team to be able to go out and win these deals and connect with our buyers. So lend your expertise on sales calls. You can share what you're seeing in terms of market conditions. You can talk about those customer proof points because you're so close to that. The product differentiators, of course, especially if things are changing rapidly, if you're maybe even testing different messaging, this can be a great way to ramp that up, see what the market response is without, fully training, or while you're fully training your sales team. This can be a good way to share some of those new differentiators. And then even the development roadmap, how things are changing, where you're investing, all of that is great expertise to lend to sales. And then create collateral. Collateral is a great resource. It's kind of a catch-all for the types of resources that we can create for sales, and specifically focus on the types of collateral that can open and close business. And so that might include competitor battle cards, helping them win competitive deals, industry and market overviews as well, so that they have an understanding of what's going on in the market, and then some sales email messaging to help them get those initial conversations going. So let's talk about each of these three types of collateral. So first off, battle cards. Now, if you're like a lot of the businesses that I've chatted with, you likely have a lot of competitors, wide ranging from direct or to indirect or even different verticals. What you can do in that situation, if it's too much to tackle battle cards for every single competitor out of the gate, try starting with your most direct competitors, the competitors that are coming up the most. Of course, keep an eye out as well for newly competitive companies. One of the things that you can do there is track the frequency by which any particular competitor comes up in sales deals, have sales log those in whatever CRM you're using. And that can help you identify when maybe a newcomer to the scene is cropping up more and might need a little bit more attention. And then make sure that you're refreshing the battle card content consistently. That's how you're going to get adoption. That's also how you're going to get effectiveness. So make sure that the data, the content there is always up to date. Industry intelligence. So here we're talking about market, vertical, or industry reports. So this is to give our sales team some of that broader context to understand where their buyers are coming from, who they're talking to, what's on their minds. And so this could include some macroeconomic and policy shifts, especially in some of the more regulated industries. Changes in buyer behavior, what you're seeing, in a lot of ways, we are, we're out there, we're talking to people, we're hearing what's happening in the market. Share some of that back with the sales team so that they know what to expect and what's on people's minds. Any sort of vertical specific trends as well, whether you have sales teams that are oriented around different verticals or generally just more intelligence, the better for them to have that context. And then any data. Data is always great for helping sales to justify the ROI of your product, especially when budgets are tighter. And make sure that they know how to avoid any sort of traps or any sort of concerns around weaknesses that you might have or that you might be dealing with. So a lot of great kind of intelligence or market perspectives to help the sales team here. And then sales messaging, especially on the email side. Some more interesting data here from HubSpot on the number of emails that sales is sending and their response rate. And you can see a pretty stark difference in our current, pandemic scenario, where emails have increased dramatically compared to kind of the pre-pandemic levels. But at the same time, email response rates have gone down and down and down. So clearly, their effectiveness is losing some steam there, but they're sending more and more email. What's interesting is HubSpot also released some data on the marketing email side. And they actually found a very similar trend in terms of volume, but the opposite trend in terms of response rate. So marketing emails are actually improving in terms of their response rate. And maybe that's because marketing is adjusting a lot more of their messaging, trying out different things, trying out different campaigns and tactics. So we need to translate that back into our sales messaging. And that might be, focusing on certainly timely messages, even some more personalization, just focus on that quality over quantity piece, because that's really what's going to cut through the noise. All right, so we've talked about marketing, we've talked about sales. Let's talk about the product side of things here. So the question here is, how much should we really be changing our product strategy? Product strategy is much more of a long-term, discussion. And we don't want to be overly reactive to any sort of market developments, especially if things could go back to quote unquote normal sooner rather than later. And at our core, we always want to be focusing on customer value. That's always the focus. We're trying to solve for our customers and their challenges and their needs. But the question remains, tied to that: have our customer needs changed? Have they shifted? Is our value prop still effective? Is it actually losing differentiation? Those might be signs that it's time to pivot some of the roadmap here. And again, this comes back to that balance between customer centricity and competitor consciousness. So of course, on the customer centricity side, we want to stay connected to our customers' needs, to their goals and challenges. And we want to understand how the current market developments are impacting our customers. And then on the competitor consciousness side, we need to make sure that we're offering the best possible product that really serves customers' needs in a unique way compared to other solutions out there. So a couple of examples here. First, a product pivot. This is an example actually from our own business, where product pivots don't have to be this big lift, right? In some cases, it might, maybe in travel, hospitality, some of those shifts have to be a lot bigger in order to stay afloat. But in a lot of cases, you can look for some features that are already present in your solutions and pivot them, create different use cases that address current market environments. So what you see here is dashboarding functionality that we have inside of our competitive intelligence platform. And we started to create COVID-19 command center dashboards, working with our customers so that they could stay on top of what was happening with all of these market shifts. There wasn't, in our case, it wasn't necessarily new revenue that came from that, but it was a great way to engage our customers and make sure that they were getting value. And that pivot really enabled us to better serve our customers and talk about how our solution might fit with some of the new prospects that we were talking with. So product pivots can be a great, especially if they're low lift, a great way to address the market changes. And then it might, some of these product changes might be more on the pricing and packaging side. So an example here from HubSpot, for the industries that are serving small businesses or for particular industries that have been hit hard, pricing is a big challenge. And so what you can see here is that they made a temporary pricing change that is, doesn't require massive changes to the product side of things, but better addresses some of the challenges that their small business customers were having. They also, made sure that it included a whole set of features, a lot of different, their different starter packages, so that the small business segment would be able to continue to buy and continue to see value, and I imagine likely also manage against customer cancellations. Of course, whenever you're reducing prices or introducing discounts, make sure to balance this out with so that you're not cheapening your product. You want to make sure that when you come out of this market environment, that you can go back to the successful, levels of, pricing and so on that you had before. And, creating some sort of time-bound offer might be a good way to do that. All right. Our final, but definitely a very important audience are executives, our executive leadership, and providing guidance to them. The reality is that our executives need market and competitive intelligence now more than ever. Sorry, I know I keep saying that quite a bit, but we're definitely living through unprecedented times. And executive leadership not only needs this data, but they also need it faster and more frequently than we've seen previously. So just some examples here, the types of competitor activity that executive leadership needs to know about, M&A, funding, any sort of financial event, press and marketing tactics. We're seeing that executives are asking for more marketing details than previously. Maybe they were kind of taking a step back from that, but now a lot of companies are shifting their messaging and their marketing tactics. So executives are asking for visibility into that. Any sort of headcount changes as well, especially if it changes how and how much they are investing in different parts of the business. And then the major product pivots. And essentially, a lot of the areas that we've talked about in terms of enabling our own teams, we need to know how our competitors are doing those same types of activities. And then, of course, overall, those macro market shifts and how, what's going on in the market. And when we think about the role of product marketers and the role of product managers, we are the subject matter experts for everything that's going on, right? So there's that much more to talk about, but this is the audience to tackle that the best. So providing regular updated reports or even dashboards that update on their own for executive leadership is a great way to leverage that expertise and share it with the audience that needs it most. One thing to keep in mind is that it's not just about providing them with the data, it is that much more necessary to provide context around them. So provide the takeaway. You're seeing that the competitors are shifting their messaging in this way. Well, what does that mean for our messaging? What does that mean for the audience that they're trying to address? Provide some of that context and those insights around the data itself. And so I wanted to provide some guidance here on different types of executive reports. Because there are a lot of tactical reports and a lot of strategic reports, and they can be pretty different in terms of the types of activities that we need to do and the types of outputs that get created. So on the tactical side, what I mean here is a lot of self-explanatory individual points of data, meaning competitor raises a Series B round of financing. Great, that's pretty self-explanatory. Even the press release with the quotes and whatnot pretty much stands on its own, doesn't need a lot of explanation around it. Usually that tends to be a single scenario or a single event. Like I said, doesn't really need much context. It pretty much stands on its own. And for these types of data points, it's really important to deliver each of those data points and get them out as quickly as possible. So whether that be an email alert or if your executives are active on an internal chat, that can be another way to get that out there. But making sure to get those data points out there quickly and as much as possible. On the strategic side, though, while the tactical side, in a lot of cases, can be semi-automated, doesn't require as much work, the strategic side requires a lot more analysis and a lot more storytelling. So here, it might not be about one individual data point. It's likely a series of data points that combined tell a story about the direction that a competitor is going. With say the current pandemic, a lot of companies are shifting their messaging, like we've talked about, while pulling a lot of those data points together, maybe a couple of homepage changes and product changes and, a recent, content marketing guide and press release. All of those pieces together may show that they're really hammering home on a particular phrase around or a particular value or use case or what might be around the current market environment. So really pulling out those multiple data points, using data visualization when it makes sense, showing maybe the level of activity in different channels, that can be really helpful for starting to tell a story and pull together that narrative of what you're starting to see, especially because this will relate not just to what the competitors are doing today, but where you're expecting them to go tomorrow, next week, next month, next year. So that strategic piece, those strategic reports can be more time consuming, but really, really valuable and may not be as frequent, but just as important. So a little bit of an example here of a dashboard. Remember, these reports, these analyses don't have to be these big projects that happen every month or whatnot. It can be in the form of a living dashboard where you're showing, say, the social media response around the COVID pandemic, the M&A activity recently, and even the partnership program activity. Having a single place where executives can go and see what's happening at any given time, and then coupling that with, say, every 2 weeks, sending out kind of a recap of what happened the last 2 weeks in case they missed it. That can be really effective for keeping executives up to date in as lightweight possible. All right, so we are wrapping up at this point, so we'll hopefully get to dive into a lot of different questions that you have. But just to summarize what we've talked about, rapidly evolving markets really give us a great opportunity within product marketing, within product management, to leverage our expertise and to really have an outsized impact. Everyone in the company right now needs a lot of updates and understanding around what's happening in the market. And so this is our time to step up and really, really provide a lot of value to the organization. And when you're looking at these market shifts, think about the impact it has on your business and make the necessary adjustments. It might not be all of these things, but in a lot of cases, we're seeing pretty much every business tackle each of these 4 areas. That's shifting messaging and marketing tactics. A lot of marketing tactics have changed. A lot of companies are changing their messaging to align with what they're seeing, what they're hearing from prospects. Then also creating and updating sales resources. There are fewer deals to go around, so it's that much more important to win as many as possible. So making sure that those sales resources are up to date and even lending our actual voices in a lot of cases. And then pivoting product offerings and packaging. Again, a lot of companies are taking this approach to be able to maintain business and keep on growing and really show that we're reacting and adjusting to the market environment. And then, of course, delivering both the tactical and strategic intelligence updates to our executives, really everyone in the organization. That tactical piece can be great for quick response and quick alignment, and the strategic piece can be great for planning and understanding where we need to make our own strategic shifts. And then make sure that you're keeping your own market knowledge fresh. It's the rest of the organization is coming to you for that information. You want to make sure that you have everything that you need, and all of that is that data is getting fed to you, so that you can spend your time on analyzing it, getting it out, packaging it up for all of those different audiences across the organization. I will leave you with one quick resource, which is really a package of different resources. It's our Rapid Market Response Kit. It's a selection of a few different resources that we've created, including our Guide to Competitive Battle Cards, which of course we talked about, executive briefing templates. So if you're planning on creating deliverables for your executive audience, a few different templates there. Guide to Competitive Intelligence, if that's a newer area for you. And our product launch toolkit for those of you still out there launching products or maybe launching a new product given the market environment, that can be particularly helpful. You can get all of those in one go at crayon.co/pragmatic, and let us know what you think. With that, would love to take some questions.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ellie. That was great. All right, lots of good stuff there, and we got some good questions as well. So you guys, as you remember, you can put them in the chat or you can put them in the Q&A section. But our first question is, how do you suggest keeping track of competitor messaging changes if you have more than a couple competitors? If you got a crowded space.
Yeah. That's I think a common challenge. I think a lot of us have more competitors to keep tabs on than we'd like, perhaps. And what I think you can do here is tier out your competitors, group them in some way. There are a lot of different ways to segment out your competitors. It might be by how frequently they come up. It might be by vertical, by geography, however you organize your own team. That can be helpful for all sorts of different types of competitor analyses, including messaging analysis. And so start with one group and then expand from there. That can be a great way to start to even test out some of the deliverables that you're sharing out with your team, right? So if the marketing audience is kind of the recipient of some of that messaging analysis, starting with one segment and sharing the results of that analysis with the marketing department can be helpful for getting their feedback and seeing how they incorporate it into their own work. And then you can use some of that feedback for the next round of messaging analysis with some of those other segments.
Great. So the next question is, I think, something all product marketers and all marketing people have probably dealt with at some point, but how do we ensure that salespeople adopt the collateral that we provide them?
Yes, definitely a common challenge that we've heard about. One of the biggest factors, I'd say, is the value of the content itself. So making sure that it is up to date, especially right now when things have changed so much. If you have out-of-date information on those pieces of collateral, like battle cards or reports and whatnot, that's instant way to have them be abandoned. So making sure that they're up to date is really key. I'd also say that working with your sales team, really partnering with them in the creation and rollout of assets can be really helpful. So I find that a lot of times when sales doesn't adopt something, it's because there's some sort of disconnect between what they're hearing and what is addressed in whatever resource. And so by working with them through the creation process, you can get that sort of input to make sure that you're addressing whatever's on their mind or whatever they're seeing. And then when you actually do the rollout, you have that salesperson or a couple of salespeople who have helped in the process be part of the rollout, and it lends extra credibility. And they can even talk about how what they've seen has been incorporated or how they've used it. But working with a couple of sales reps before the rollout, I think, can be helpful for adoption.
That's a great idea, getting a sales advocate to work with you on those.
Mm-hmm.
So you talked about updating. How often do we update the team, right? You want to keep people current in process, but if you do it too much, it can become just sort of noise that they don't hear anymore. So what do you have the tips for the right amount of updating for the team?
Yeah, I'd say that right now is my answer is a little bit different than what it would have been, a few months ago. Where I think right now there's a there's a big hunger for more updates than less. Still, again, like you don't want to overwhelm people. You get email fatigue, and people start to tune out what you're saying. So I think having some sort of separating out your push and pull communications can be helpful. So by that I mean maybe you have a push communication every month, and it's a newsletter style update to the broader organization or the broader sales team or what have you, and that has the big hits. And then you have more pull or self-serve resources that are available for those who want it. So that could be in the form of a Slack channel for competitive and market news. And it's optional to join, but people who are more interested in more updates can join that and get more frequent updates. Same thing goes with dashboards. Again, you're not necessarily pushing it every single day, but it's available and up to date for those who do want to get updates in real time, and letting people subscribe, on demand to any particular kind of subset of data can be kind of a good spin-off from that, where, say you have a dashboard with a lot of different data points on it. They can maybe subscribe to updates specifically on M&A activity or on the partner program activity, whatever it might be that might be particularly relevant to that person. Giving them the option to subscribe to that can be that much kind of a quick way to both serve their needs without adding a lot of work onto your plate.
That's a great idea, right? Like, make sure that they can focus on the items that are most relevant and interesting to them.
Mm-hmm.
Great. All right. So of course, all of this takes a ton of research and analysis. How do you prioritize this?
Mm-hmm. That is a great question. First off, I don't think that there is a silver bullet. I recently actually wrote an article about prioritizing product marketing, the never-ending product marketing to-do list. So that blog article is probably pretty relevant right now. I think it comes down to a bunch of different things, depending on what who are the loudest and most for lack of a better term, needy audiences in your organization. So say if that's the executive team trying to make some key strategic decisions, you probably want to prioritize there. I mean, honestly, you probably want to prioritize the executive audience anyhow. But then beyond the executive audience, it's about where you're going to have the biggest impact. If sales is struggling the most, then maybe that's where you focus on next. Or if there's, the messaging that's coming out of marketing has lost all of its effectiveness and is a real sore spot for everybody, then that's where you focus. So I think the key thing is to not try to bite it all off at once. Make the conscious decision to focus in one area versus another, and communicate that, so that it's not like everybody is expecting the whole to-do list to be done tomorrow. You're being very clear that we're going to prioritize these 3 areas for the next 30 days. After that, we're going to focus on these next 3 areas, and so on. And setting those expectations can be really helpful for of course, setting the expectations, and having some reasonable requests come through, but then even having that conversation, because it might be that people disagree about what those top 3 things should be, and having that conversation is really important, so that you don't end up at the end of the month and the quarter and so on feeling good about what you've done, when the reality was that what you perceived as top priorities were not the same as what the rest of the organization saw as a top priority. So have that conversation, set those expectations, and don't try to bite off too much at once.
So it's going to end with my favorite question, which is, if you could have people do 2 things differently today based on or 2 things differently tomorrow based on what we talked about today, what would it be?
I think that's a great one. I think the first thing would be to set up a command center for yourself. I think that this is an underappreciated tactic, but actually makes your life a lot easier. It can be exhausting to keep tabs on everything that's happening in the market and the competition and all of that. But there are a lot of ways to create dashboards so that you're getting updates um, automatically without having to go out and research it every day. Because it's not like there's going to be an event every single day that needs attention, but you want to know when there is an event that needs attention. And so a dashboard can be, or alerts or what have you, just set up some sort of automation for yourself so you have a single place that's almost like keeping eyes on what's most important out there. And then the other aspect would be think about one thing that is going to have tangible impact on your business's success. And maybe that's a simple sales battle card. Maybe it's, a quick marketing messaging brief. Just like one quick tactical thing, get that out the door and get feedback on it. Because I think you get so much great input when you get feedback from something that's been completed. Just get these little things out there and you'll be able to iterate based on that. And you'll be able to move that much faster as a result.
All right, Ellie, thank you so much for joining us today. It was a pleasure to have you on.
Great. Thank you so much. I'm so glad that there was so much interest in this topic. Certainly something that's a lot on my mind, but hopefully everybody found the content helpful.
All right. And thank you everyone for joining us today. That does it for today. And I encourage you to join us next Tuesday for the next session of Product Chat. And remember, every Friday you can find me online with one or sometimes more instructors answering any and all of your questions during our office hour sessions. That's every Friday, 10:30 Pacific, 1:30 Eastern. All right, that does it for this edition of Pragmatic Live. Thank you for joining us. Stay safe, stay healthy, and have a great rest of the week.